Crowley stubbornly remained alone in his tent, ignoring the cries of the survivors. They drank cat's blood during the ceremony. The abbey was filled with drugs, black magic, and debauchery, one of the best-selling and most successful tarot decks in history. This event became known as the Battle of Blythe Road. To the uninitiated, it appears that there are two personalities in man, the conscious and the unconscious. But the truth is that it is the conscious which is only the mask, and the unconscious which is the real person. Today, we will talk about Aleister Crowley, the most wicked man in the world, a great mystic, a wild rock and roller, and a man who never compromised with himself. Here are 7 of the most insane details of Aleister Crowley's portrait. The Beast 666. Aleister Crowley was born to Emily Bertha Bishop and Edward Crowley on October 12, 1875, and was baptized as Edward Alexander Crowley. He preferred the Scottish version of the name and called himself Aleister. His father, Edward Crowley, was a successful brewer who had inherited a considerable fortune. He retired early and devoted all of his time to his religious community. The Crowley family was deeply religious. Both his mother and father were members of the Plymouth Brethren, a conservative Protestant group. Aleister was 11 when his father died of cancer, the result of unsuccessful treatment recommended by members of the Plymouth Brethren community. Crowley never forgave them for choosing charlatanism over science, blaming the Brethren and their religion as accomplices in his father's death. Crowley recalled that his father's death coincided with the awakening of his new self-awareness. He became his own man. The death of his father had a profound effect on Aleister, who, protesting against his mother's religiosity, engaged in all sorts of antisocial behavior, including heavy drinking, public masturbation, and other forms of countercultural protest. His rebellion went far enough, eventually leading to consequences like gonorrhea and syphilis from frequent encounters with prostitutes. Because of all this rebellious behavior, his mother called him the Beast. She was referring to the beast from the Book of Revelation. Crowley not only wasn't embarrassed by this nickname, but he embraced it as a shield. Carrying it throughout his life, he called himself the Beast 666. Indeed, Crowley truly did live up to this nickname, as will be seen in the following story. For now, it's worth noting that the Beast had a strange magnetism and aura. Meeting Aleister was fatal for many people, including his first wife, Rose Crowley, who ended up in a mental asylum. There were also several fatal incidents, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. An interesting fact, beast in Greek is therion, and I have a fleeting suspicion that George R.R. Martin chose the phonetically similar name Tyrion for a reason, and in many ways, he may have been inspired by Aleister Crowley's wild lifestyle. The Battle of Blythe Road. A significant turning point in Aleister Crowley's life was his introduction to MacGregor Mathers, the leader of one of the most influential secret societies of the early 20th century, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They met in London, and Aleister made a favourable impression on Mathers, who initiated him into the order on November 18th, 1898. At the time, the Order of the Golden Dawn had gathered under its wing many prominent philosophers, writers, poets, and occultists, including figures like William Butler Yeats, the world-famous Irish poet, Bram Stoker, the author of the classic novels about Dracula, and Arthur Edward Waite, the creator of one of the most influential tarot decks, which we discussed in our episode on the history of tarot. The main headquarters of the order was in London, but the founder, MacGregor Mathers, moved to Paris to expand the order's influence in Europe by spreading its ideas and creating new connections. Aleister Crowley, known for his free-spirited nature and ambition, behaved tactlessly and earned a reputation as a rebel and an upstart within the Order. It's worth noting that Crowley also experimented with black magic and drugs, which affected his reputation within the Order, most of whom adhered to principles of light and higher spiritual practices. Drugs, in particular, were seen as dirty and unworthy. Crowley particularly clashed with William Butler Yeats. It's believed that Crowley was deeply envious of Yeats, as the poet was already world-renowned at the time, while Aleister's literary endeavours had not received similar attention. Regardless, Crowley's ambition to lead the London branch of the Order repelled most members. Eventually, Yeats and the core leadership of the London headquarters refused to promote Crowley to the next level of initiation. Crowley was not prepared to accept such treatment. He went to Paris to gain support from MacGregor Mathers, the founder of the Order. Mathers advised Crowley to use spells to sway the members of the Order to his side. Mathers also recommended that Crowley dress in traditional Celtic attire and bring ritual daggers. Crowley followed this advice and appeared at the Golden Dawn headquarters on Blythe Road in London, where the first recorded battle of wizards began. The main battleground was the staircase leading to the headquarters, where Yeats and a few others blocked Crowley's entry. Crowley, with no other choice, raised his hands in the sign of the pentagram, attempting to break through their force fields with his spells. It's unknown how the confrontation would have ended, whether with magical fireballs or a tear in the space-time continuum, if not for Yeats, whose foot became the decisive tool of magical impact when he kicked Aleister Crowley, who had come too close. The kick disrupted Crowley's center of magical power, sending him tumbling down the entrance hall stairs, where police demons arrived and escorted him out of the Order's headquarters. This event became known as the Battle of Blythe Road, ending in victory for Yeats. Did Crowley accept his defeat? Of course not. Their magical rivalry continued for many years, but Crowley learned the lesson of keeping his distance. The conflict was limited to long-range magical shots in the form of curses and spells directed at each other. Crowley left the Order of the Golden Dawn in 1899 and continued his journey, eventually founding his own teachings, which we will discuss later. Yeats passed away in 1939 and Crowley in 1947. Despite all their magical efforts, both men died from entirely natural causes. It's hard to fully assess the scale of this battle, but it's certain that the Battle of Blythe Road became one of the significant episodes leading to the expulsion of both Crowley and MacGregor Mathers from the Order, the division, and eventually the dissolution of the Golden Dawn. Thoth. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most prominent members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was Arthur Edward Waite, the author of the highly influential Rider-Waite Tarot deck. In general, an interest in alchemy and tarot was an integral part of the secret societies of the early 20th century. This period was a renaissance for Western occult culture. Aleister Crowley, being a seeker, was also deeply involved in Kabbalah, astrology, and tarot cards. In 1904, after being expelled from the Order, he traveled to Egypt with his first wife. This trip deeply inspired Crowley with Egyptian symbols and the religion of this ancient civilization, leading him to write his first major Thelemic text, the Book of the Law. His fascination with Egypt lasted throughout his life. In 1938, when Crowley was already 63, one of his disciples, Lady Frieda Harris, promised to reimagine the tarot based on the Book of the Law. She volunteered to create all the illustrations for both the major and minor arcana, claiming that she had been guided by her holy guardian angel to do so. Over the next few years, they worked together on the creation of the deck. Harris tirelessly worked to bring Crowley's vision to life on canvas, studying the concept of projective geometry from two students of Rudolf Steiner and incorporating these ideas into her compositions. When we ask what makes the Thoth Tarot unique, the first and most obvious answer is the art. Although the mathematical subtleties of projective geometry may be difficult to grasp, we see their captivating manifestations in Harris's use of lines, grids, arcs, vortices, curves, and angles, which together visually redefine the fabric of space, writes Lon Milo de Quet in his book on the subject. Harris's paintings, rich with symbols and references to Kabbalah, astrology, alchemy, numerology, magical correspondences, and the Book of the Law, were completed in 1943 and were used to illustrate the first edition of Crowley's The Book of Thoth. Crowley died in 1947 and Harris in 1952. Neither of them saw the publications of their paintings as tarot cards. The Thoth Tarot deck was only commercially published in 1969 and went on to become one of the best-selling and most successful tarot decks in history. Indeed, when we look at these cards, we can see the monumental work created by the collaboration of two mystics, a synergy that combined the male and female elements, the visual and the symbolic. The rock and roller. Aleister Crowley's lifestyle can easily be seen as the precursor to the rock and roll era. It's no wonder that rock icons like the Beatles, David Bowie, and Ozzy Osbourne frequently quoted and portrayed him. After entering Cambridge in 1895, Crowley led a very hedonistic life. He was fascinated by experimenting with various drugs, which he used both in rituals and for pleasure, eventually developing a strong addiction to heroin and opium. Many of these experiments are documented in his autobiographical book, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which we recommend to those particularly interested in learning more. Crowley loved to create. One of his passions was poetry and literature, and as an unconventional person, the Beast approached these subjects in his special way. His work often provoked shock, rejection, and outright horror in Victorian English society, and that was his goal. He protested against conformity, shattered their morals and their prejudices, and forced them to question their own infallibility. He shouted at them, "I don't need your false approval or your fake praises. To hell with Christianity, rationalism, and Buddhism. I want blasphemy, murder, violence. I don't care if it's good or bad. I want power." Crowley wrote erotic and graphic poetry. One of his famous collections, White Stains, clearly alludes to its content in its title. You can pause the video here and read this harmless excerpt from one of his poems. We'll censor certain words. In addition to his early 20th century rock star persona, Crowley also propagated the teachings of magic. He introduced these practices within the secret society he led, called the Order Templi Orientis. Crowley believed that harnessing sexual energy could open new horizons in a person's spiritual growth. He had a very open-minded approach to relationships, engaging both in heterosexual and homosexual encounters. He was a proponent and practitioner of open love, without commitment or ties to a single person. Naturally, this shocked moralists, and he was openly criticized and condemned. This eventually led to the creation of something, which I will talk about in the final chapter of our video. But it's worth noting Crowley's productivity and efficiency in the work he truly cared about. During his lifetime, Aleister Crowley published over 40 books on occultism, ceremonial magic, as well as poetry and philosophy. Hella good mountaineer. At Cambridge, Aleister Crowley didn't just indulge in a wild lifestyle of relations with prostitutes and excessive drinking. In his spare time, he showed himself to be a determined young man. He became the president of the chess club and dove deep into the British mountaineering community. He successfully climbed the Swiss Alps, conquering the Eiger, Wetterhorn, Jungfrau, and Monch, among other peaks, although he left Cambridge without a degree in 1898. Eckstein, one of Crowley's first mountaineering partners, wrote in his autobiography, The Confessions, about Aleister's boundless gymnastic strength, including his ability to do one-arm pull-ups. In Mexico, the duo managed to conquer the peaks of Ixtaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl, the third and second highest mountains in the country, respectively. They also made unsuccessful attempts to ascend Volcán de Colima, which erupted while they were on it, and Pico de Orizaba, the highest peak in Mexico. In 1902, Crowley and Eckstein made the first attempt to climb K2 as part of a group. The group planned to reach the summit via the northeast ridge, but the expedition was a disaster. The weather was terrible. Only 8 out of the 68 days on the mountain offered suitable climbing conditions. Crowley suffered from the flu, malaria, snow blindness, and severe altitude sickness, while Eckstein, the expedition leader, battled a respiratory infection. At one point, in a feverish delirium, Crowley threatened fellow climber Guy Knowles with a revolver when he refused to keep going. Surprisingly, all members of the expedition returned unharmed. Afterwards, Crowley expressed his opinion that the northeast ridge was not the best route, suggesting that the Abruzzi Ridge, southeast ridge, was a better option for climbing. When K2 was finally conquered by an Italian team over half a century later, in 1954, they followed the Abruzzi Ridge, which has since become the standard route on the mountain. In 1905, Crowley attempted to climb another 8,000-meter peak, Kanchenjunga. Crowley led the expedition, which also ended unsuccessfully. His incredible arrogance as a leader caused discontent among his climbing partners, and he treated the porters terribly, frequently beating them. After the team was caught in an avalanche at an altitude of 21,300 feet, 2 members tried to stage a failed coup against Crowley, demanding he be removed from leadership. Subsequently, this duo, along with another member of the team, Alexis Pache, and 4 porters, began to descend from Camp 5 at night, despite Crowley's warnings not to do so. Soon after, they were swept away by an avalanche, killing 3 of the porters and Pache. Although another team member, Charles Adolphe Raymond, immediately set out to help, Crowley stubbornly remained alone in his tent, ignoring the cries of the survivors. Later, he wrote a letter to an Indian newspaper expressing his disdain for his companions, remarking, "Accidents in the mountains are one of those things for which I have no sympathy." The next day, as he descended the mountain, he passed by the site of the accident without stopping to help recover the bodies or speak to the survivors. He later fled to Darjeeling with the remaining expedition funds. The mountain was finally conquered in 1955 by a British team using the same route that Crowley and his companions had forged 50 years earlier. The Prophet. In 1899, Crowley left the Order of the Golden Dawn and embarked on travels around the world. Financially secure due to inheriting a large family fortune after his mother's death, he dedicated himself to exploration and mountaineering, visiting Mexico, Japan, and India. In 1903, he married Rose Edith Kelly, whom he had only known for 1 day, and they left for their honeymoon in Egypt. According to Crowley himself, the pivotal moment occurred on March 16, 1904, when he attempted to perform a special ritual for his wife called the Bournless Ritual. They spent the night in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Giza. During the ritual, Rose fell into a light trance and repeatedly said, "They are waiting for you." Since Rose had no interest in magic or mysticism, she didn't take this seriously. However, on March 18th, after Crowley invoked Thoth, the god of knowledge, Rose mentioned Horus by name as the one waiting for Aleister. On April 7th, Rose gave Crowley instructions. He was to enter the temple for 3 days and record what he heard between noon and 1 p.m. each day. Crowley followed these instructions, and the result was the first book of Thelema, titled The Book of the Law. According to him, he wrote it in just 3 days. Thelema is a Greek word meaning will, often used in the New Testament to refer to the will of God. In the Thelemic system, it refers to each person's unique life path. Crowley's new religion, Thelema, was based on 3 core principles. Number 1. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Followers of Thelema must seek and follow their true path, known as their true will. Number 2. Every man and every woman is a star. Individuals, in following their will, are like stars in the universe, each occupying their own time and place in space, remaining unique and independent without unnecessary conflict with other stars. And number 3. Love is the law, love under will. Love is the force that creates unity. However, love is also a blind force and cannot be applied indiscriminately, or the subject will destroy the object. You must master your will and direct your love properly, creating unity with the world while subordinating this force to your will and control. Crowley introduced the concept of Thelemic magic, a system of physical, mental, and spiritual exercises believed by practitioners to be beneficial. He defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will, spelling it magic, to distinguish it from stage magic. Crowley recommended magic as a way to discover one's true will. The concept of Thelemia intersects in many ways with the teachings of yoga, the theories of theosophy by Helena Blavatsky, and Kabbalah. In Thelemia, the ultimate goal is often described as the realization of one's true will, considered to be a person's unique and genuine purpose or destiny. Through ritual magic and meditation, Thelemites seek to align their lives with their true will, ultimately leading to self-realization and spiritual growth. The wickedest man in the world. Like any serious mystic and practitioner, Crowley wanted to test the knowledge he had accumulated over his life, as well as the tenets of his newly created religion, Thelema, in practice. Ancient mystics often retreated into asceticism and caves for meditation and practice. Crowley and his then partner, Leah Herzig, founded a similar retreat in 1920 on the island of Sicily, in Italy, called the Abbey of Thelema. Crowley transformed a small villa into a spiritual sanctuary and center for personal growth, where initiates underwent magical training and engaged in self-discovery through meditation, yoga, and Thelemic rituals, all based on the main tenet, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Crowley's concept of sex magic was also a key element in the Abbey's practices, where sex was viewed as a powerful tool for spiritual development and transformation. The villa itself became an artistic experiment. Crowley painted the walls with occult symbols and overtly sexual imagery, designed to inspire and spiritually challenge the residents. Things might have continued this way for many years, but sometimes people take the main tenet too literally, and without fully understanding whether it is their true will, do foolish things. In 1923, Raoul Loveday died under mysterious circumstances while living at the Abbey. Officially, the cause of death was drinking contaminated water from a local source, but rumors spread that his death was linked to one of Crowley's occult rituals, with claims that Loveday drank cat's blood during the ceremony. Loveday's wife, Betty May, returned to England and gave sensational testimonies to the press, claiming that the Abbey was filled with drugs, black magic, and debauchery. Her scandalous story further fueled Crowley's growing infamy, portraying the Abbey as a place of moral decay and dangerous practices. Crowley's reputation was already tarnished by previous scandals, and the press quickly picked up on the story of the Abbey. British tabloids labelled Crowley as the wickedest man in the world, and described the Abbey as a den of perversion and blasphemy. The negative attention attracted the concern of the Italian government under Benito Mussolini, which swiftly took action. In 1923, Crowley was expelled from Italy and the Abbey of Thelema was shut down by the authorities. After Crowley's departure, the villa fell into disrepair and was largely forgotten for many years. However, Crowley's followers and admirers continue to view the abbey as an important part of his legacy. In the decades following its closure, the villa became a pilgrimage site for Crowley enthusiasts, though it remained in ruins. Some of the frescoes and murals Crowley painted survived for many years. The Abbey of Thelema remains an important symbol of Aleister Crowley's radical experiment in living according to his magical and philosophical principles. The Abbey was an attempt to create a microcosm of his vision for a society governed by Thelemic ideals. Thelema emphasized individual freedom, self-realization, and the pursuit of true will, which was supposed to lead to higher spiritual development. But the short-lived existence of the Abbey highlighted the practical difficulties of maintaining such an idealistic community, especially under the eccentric and controversial leadership of Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, the Beast 666, was certainly a complex figure. He provoked more controversies than he resolved. Some idolize him, others despise him, but one thing is certain: he left an indelible mark on 20th century occultism. What struck me most while crafting this portrait is this: despite all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, syphilis and drinking, Aleister Crowley lived to the ripe old age of 72. I think he did manage to grasp something in his pursuit of truth. What do you think? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and see you in the Guild of Secrets.